Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. In the world, there are an incredible number of various events that have to do with the elements. There are tornadoes, there are hurricanes, there are floods, there are monsoons. There are all kinds of events that batter everything that they run into. In the same way, man, as he walks through the world, gets battered. In the same way, a flower, when a strong wind comes, batters the flower and might knock the leaves off the flower, knock the petals off the flower, put it through a lot of difficulty. In the same way, man gets put through a lot of difficulty. As man is attached to the world, these various attachments that he holds on to and considers important, if things don't turn out in his way, he becomes distressed, he becomes tired, he becomes under the influence of difficult things. The shore holds the ocean in. It creates a barrier. It creates a border for the water. In the same way, a man of wisdom creates a border for people in difficulty. As they get battered by the winds and whatever, a man of wisdom can stand in place and lessen the assault, lessen the difficulty, lessen the trauma that is caused to man. And this is one of the reasons that people go to teachers. They're traumatized. They've had so much difficulty in their life, and they're looking for some peace. The teacher becomes one who is able to bring some peace into their life by explaining to them what it is that's causing the trauma and what it is that is needed in order to relieve the trauma. The Buddha was sitting and meditating, and a Brahmin, which is a Hindu being higher up in the caste system, came and began to ridicule him and to scream at him and to denounce him. And the Buddha just sat there with a serene look on his face. And this made the Brahmin even angrier. And he began to scream louder and to scream more. And there was no reaction. Nothing at all seemed to faze the Buddha. So the Brahmin says, "What's wrong with you? Why don't you react to me?" And the Buddha looked at him and said, "I don't accept what it is that you have to give. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you. And it's your problem. It's not my problem. I don't accept it. It's as if you tried to give me some coins and I wouldn't take them. Whose coins would they be? They would remain your coins. And in that way, all of your words are your words. All of your criticism is your criticism. It remains with you. It doesn't have anything to do with me because I don't accept it. It's like that with praise and blame in this world. If we are out there trying to gain praise and trying to avoid blame, we are setting ourselves up to become traumatized. We are setting ourselves up to run into difficulty. Whenever you're trying to avoid something, you're in and out and in and out. You're not in a state of peace. You're not in a state of calmness. If you're looking for praise, you're not in a state of calmness. If you're looking to avoid criticism, you're not in a state of calmness. In order to know the difference between an appropriate state to be in and a state to get out of, we have to be able to watch ourselves. But we have to be able to watch ourselves with wisdom. We have to know what an appropriate state for us is and how to get into that appropriate state. A sheikh sent one of his disciples to get some water from a lake. And the lake, when he got there, had many animals in it, mostly buffalo. And they had made the water turbulent, and it was all muddy, and you couldn't get at the water. And he went back to the sheikh and he said, the water isn't appropriate to drink. And the sheikh said, sit down, we'll rest for a while. And they did. And an hour later, he sent him back to the lake to get water again. Now the water was clear, and he took his pot, filled it, and brought the water back to the sheikh. And the sheikh said to him, in the same way that the lake became calm over the passage of time without you doing anything, the same way your mind can become calm over the passage of time without any interference from you, as long as you leave it alone. But if you attach to it, you're going to continue the turmoil. You're going to continue the difficulty. So we, each of us, individually, has to learn to detach from the ongoing, constant meanderings of the mind, which are constantly in a state of criticism of the world, trying to make sense of the world, and trying to find praise and avoid blame. The underlying aspect of all of this is that we individually are somehow separate from the rest of the world outside of us. And because of that, we see differences in what's going on outside of us. We see differences in direction. We see differences in attitudes. We see differences in dramas and the scenarios that the world plays out. However, if we understand that there is a unity in existence and that we are all part of that one unity, the way we see things begins to change. So there's unity and there's duality. There's unity and there's separations. There's unity and there's fragments. We have to understand how this affects us. If we are part of everything, and if we understand that we are part of everything, then we can enter into a unity with existence, and there is but one. But as soon as we leave that unity and go into duality, that's when we begin to run into turmoil. Separating ourselves from everything else causes us difficulty. Bringing ourselves together with everything else causes unity and brings about peace. Allah is one. He is not separate. But if our life sees separations, we have somehow gone away from that one, and we have entered into duality. When we are in duality, we have lost our unity. We have lost our connection to things. We have lost our oneness. Now, when oneness is lost, then we are in the midst of trying to create more than one. And what is that more than one that we're trying to create? We're trying to create the sanctity of the self. We're trying to make ourselves important. We're trying to make ourselves stand out somehow and be praised somehow. We're trying to make ourselves important somehow. Now, in doing that, we take on the responsibility of maintaining that duality. Since the world is in a state of unity, for us to maintain duality takes a certain kind of effort. And that effort is not a peaceful effort. That effort is an effort towards separation. That effort is an effort towards making this world something other than what it is supposed to be. We are supposed to be in a state of unity, in a state of understanding the oneness of all creation. But if we try to create a state of separateness in order to somehow make ourselves more powerful, then we are using an enormous amount of energy to counteract that which is the established truth, the established reality. We are fighting reality. We are fighting the truth. We are fighting God's way. One who is in a state of wisdom and in a state of unity has peace. He has equanimity. He has kindness. He has love. He has compassion. He has mercy. He doesn't have the opposites of these things. One who's trying to create duality has separation. He has jealousy. He has hastiness. He has greed. He has anger. He has things that separate himself from everything else. And if we're on that path of separation, of bringing ourselves to a point where we are different than everyone else, we are going to run into all of the difficulties that the elemental world has to bring. Separation is elemental. Unity is godly. So if we bring about separation and qualities which separate ourselves from other parts of humanity, then we are bringing upon ourselves all of the elemental difficulties. Then the tornadoes in the world, the hurricanes in the world, the earthquakes in the world, the volcanoes in the world, all of these kinds of things will attack us. We will end up in feuds, in fights, in wars, in all of the things that separations lead to. When people cannot agree, the amount of discord that occurs usually slowly rises and rises and rises until it comes to the state of war and murder. It becomes incredibly difficult for men to maintain their civility towards each other when the distance between them grows and grows and grows. Man has to understand that power does not belong to him. Domination does not belong to him. Control does not belong to him. But if man insists on power, if man insists on domination, if man insists on control, the inevitable that's going to happen is conflict. And that conflict can be in many different degrees, but the ultimate conflict is war and murder. And if you look around the world right now, that kind of conflict is going on in many, many places. That kind of conflict is going on in Syria. That kind of conflict is going on in Libya. That kind of conflict is going on in Afghanistan. That kind of conflict is going on in parts of Pakistan. This kind of conflict is going on in various parts of Africa and some parts of South America. This conflict is leading to distress individually, communally, nations, all through the world. And this conflict doesn't end quickly. It's very difficult for people who are in a constant state of conflict to come into a state of peace. Now, what's interesting is that there's this belief system that conflict can be brought to a state of peace. By starting a war, you can somehow create peace. Well, after World War I, it was said this was the war to end all wars, and there would never be another war. Within 30 years approximately, World War II started, and it was the same situation all over again. World War II ended in approximately 1945. Within 5 or 6 years, the Korean conflict started. There seems to be an inability of humanity to see its blunders and mistakes and to learn from them. They keep repeating them over and over and over. Now, what are we to do individually? What can we do to help in this cause? If one man can become a true man, if one man can transcend all of the differences within humanity and see the unity with all existence, if one man can come to the point where he sees all lives as his own, where he sees and treats all lives as his own, where he feels the hunger of all men and makes no distinctions, then that man becomes godlike. And that man brings God's unity into this world. And a man who brings God's unity into this world has enormous power for the good. God's power is without limit. And a man who can use God's power because of his inherent unity, his inherent goodness, his inherent ability to unite everything within himself so that he sees the unity among all of creation, can bring about the beginnings of unity in creation. So we need rulers who are in a state of unity. But instead, we have rulers who are in a state of disunity. So even if we can't do it on a national level, we can do it on a level of our interface with the people that we know and the people that we see and encounter. So if we can individually become unified within ourselves, we can begin to spread unity in this world. We can bring unity into the world. We can bring correct action and wisdom in the world. A good man stands as a bank, like the bank of an ocean or a river, to hold back the flow of that which is inappropriate. And this obligation is inherent with each of us. This obligation is something each of us has to take on, and each of us has to endeavor to show the world. If you have been given the knowledge, and if you have been given the wisdom of how to use this knowledge, then it is incumbent upon you to bring this to the rest of humanity. God wants his message out there, and he has sent 124,000 prophets. He's sent ketubs. He's sent friends. He sent various people to put out this message of unity and cohesion. But instead, people find separation to be an easier path to follow. Instead of all religion, we have my religion. Instead of all races, we have my race. Instead of all mankind, we have my nationality. We keep separating ourselves into various groups. We keep separating ourselves in incredibly minute ways. Not only are the religions separate from each other, within each religion, you have sect upon sect upon sect. Not only are races separate from each other, but within the races, you have variations. You have people who separate themselves even within the same race. This problem with separation is one of the big problems that humanity faces. If we can do away with the sin of separation within ourselves, then we have come a long way towards creating a better world. It is a phenomenon that a few going in the right direction can turn the course of many. And so when we ask, who are these few? Well, they are us. We have to be the ones who do it. And again, when you begin to do what's right, the world will try to counter you. And then you have to be able to have the certitude and the fortitude to be able to continue to do what's right, even though the world tries to stop you. And the world will continually try to stop you. So you have to learn to counteract the world. You have to learn to do that which is appropriate, even though the world doesn't want you to do what's appropriate. A group of men who were scholars were going from village to village to village to try and show that they could overwhelm with their wisdom the local mullahs, the local hojas, the local people who were leading the congregations and who were teaching within those areas. Finally, they came one day to Nasruddin's village, and they said, we're here to prove that we are more attuned to reality, that we understand things better, and that we have questions that you can't answer. And Nasruddin said, well, I'm ready. What do you have to show us? And they said, Nasruddin, tell us, where's the center of the world? And he looked and he scratched his head and he pulled on his beard and he said, the center of the world is where my donkey has its left front foot. And he said, if you don't believe me, go get a tape measure. And they didn't know how to respond. So they asked him, how many stars are there in the sky? And he went through the same, scratching his beard and scratching his head. And he said, the number of stars in the sky are equal to the number of hairs on my donkey's coat. Count them, you'll see. They gathered again together and they began to realize that these theoretical questions that they had no legitimate answers. And they were fooling themselves and everybody else if they were trying to make out that they had legitimate answers. So instead of looking for answers to theoretical questions that were impossible to answer, they decided to become students of Nasruddin. And that is one solution. Find a teacher who can pull you out of the meanderings that your mind takes you into various irrelevancies. You have to learn what is relevant and what isn't relevant, what you should spend your time with and what you shouldn't spend your time with. In this world, if you go to a library, you'll find an enormous assortment of books. If you go to biographies, you'll find books that tell you about the lives of various people in great detail and in great accuracy and covering hundreds, maybe even thousands of pages. Now, who are these people who biographies are written about? What is it that they've done? Over the course of the time that the world's been here, their life was a speck. And men study these lives as if they were important, when in truth, the only thing that has existed through all of these lives and through all of the course of time is God. The only thing that has existed since the beginning until now, without disappearing, without dying, without coming to a conclusion, is God. So why is it that we study those things that have an end as opposed to studying those things that don't have an end? Why is it that we study that which disappears as opposed to studying that which doesn't disappear? We need to be able to spend our time in a relevant way. We need to be able to focus our attention on that which is important in our life. If we focus and if we attach to things that are temporary in nature, we will become temporary. If we focus on what's eternal, we have the opportunity to become eternal. So this is a choice that we have to make. And we have to make this every day. what do we give our attention to? Do we give our attention to coming to know our Lord, or do we give our attention to coming to know this illusory short-term world? Almost all of humanity has made the decision to come to know this illusory short-term world. This illusory short-term world is what is important to people. And within this illusory short-term world, people are basically looking for two things. They're looking to avoid difficulty, to avoid punishment, to avoid blame, and they're looking to gain praise and wealth within this world. So people are looking to accumulate the world, and they somehow feel that in accumulating the assets within the world, they have somehow made themselves more, made themselves bigger, made themselves more important. But they haven't resolved the major issues. This body dissipates. This body disappears. And no matter how much of the world you accumulate, you can't stop the dissipation of this body. And if keeping this body together and keeping its place in the world is what your penultimate goal is, it's a goal that you cannot achieve. So we have all of these people doing things that can't be done. And for some reason, it never enters into the minds of these people that they're trying to do impossible things. We need to understand what is possible and what is not possible. What is not possible is eternity within this illusory world. What is not possible is maintaining this body made up of conflicting elements and maintaining it throughout eternity. We have to look somewhere else. We have to understand something else. We have to understand a different connection and a different life and a different place for us. And that place has to do with a part of us that is within our heart that we can't see. And that's called the soul. And this soul is connected to our Creator. And this soul is a light body that exists within this elemental body, which is our true body and our true self. Now, understand that consciousness doesn't need a body to exist. Consciousness exists within light. So the illusion that your consciousness is somehow tied to this body is a lie. And it's a lie that most of humanity has accepted. And they somehow think that when this body disappears, that consciousness disappears. It's not so. The ketubs come from light into the world and take the shape within elements in order for people to be able to communicate with them. But the consciousness didn't come from the body. The consciousness came from the light. And before man was created, the Nur came from Allah, and that was consciousness. That was the light of consciousness. And then God made a form to put the Nur in, and that form was created from the elements with the understanding that those elements would dissipate and go back to their original form, but the consciousness would return to the Lord. So we come from our Lord, we go into the world, we go into form, we lose form, we come back to light, and we go back to our Lord. Now, if we are concentrating on that process, then we're less interested in this world. We're less interested in the illusory. We're less interested in that which has a time limit, and we become more interested in that which is eternal. And we have to have that concentration on that which is eternal to become that which is eternal. And our long-term existence is dependent on releasing ourselves from attachment to this illusory world and leaving in the light towards our Creator. And within our Creator, we become one with reality. A movie, when we go to a movie, is not real. It's pictures on a screen. But if you make it real, you can go through all kinds of emotions, all kinds of conniptions while you're in the theater. And when you walk out, you may be lost. My sheikh said one time, when you go to the movies and the movie is over, make sure the show isn't over. You see, the real show begins when you leave the movie. And this drama of our life is the movie that we're in. We have to leave this movie and enter reality. If we think this movie is all that there is, we are stuck here. We have to unstick ourselves. We have to find truth. And in finding truth, we will find our true selves. We'll understand the reality of who we are. We'll understand our God. La ilaha. I do not exist. Only God exists. Anal haq. I have become reality. This is the process that we have to go through. Each of us has to go through this process. And as we go through this process, if we truly become real man, the influence of that will influence the entire world. The Quran says, if you save one man, you've saved all of humanity. And that man, each of us, or woman, each of us has to save is ourselves. And if we can save ourselves, the rest of humanity will also be saved. May it be so. Ameen, ameen, ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.